thank you all for choosing to be here, or at least following your schedules to come and be in the room. It is lovely to see such a full room. We're going to talk today about well-being and everything that's on the slides there, but I'm very happy for a little bit of audience participation. So if I ask a question, feel free to shout out. This isn't school. You do not have to put your hand up. Although I see I'm going to get in trouble because there's a microphone over there that needs to go to people. But I'm very happy for a little bit of audience participation. Much easier to have a conversation than just speak at a room full of faces. So to kick off, when the clicker works, next. Clicker's not working. There we go, clicker's working. or they're changing the slides at the back, either way. Does anybody know what the insurance gap is, if I use that term? So the insurance gap is a term that's frequently used within the insurance industry in the UK to describe the difference between the level of cover that everybody actually needs to have, how protected they should be, versus what they actually have. And there's actually been an estimate placed on how big that gap is. It is £3 trillion. It's a big number, right? But the problem with big numbers is sometimes it is so big we lose the context of what it means to quantify just how big a problem that is. So to put in context how big 3 trillion is, if I were to give you £1 every second starting now, so 1, 2, 3, it would take 95,000 years to get to that total. So it's a big problem. We also are facing a global well-being crisis. So since pandemic, the incidence of stress, anxiety, depression are skyrocketing. And there's also a general problem of health within the UK. Nearly 2/3 of the population are now classed as being either obese or overweight. And when you bring that all together, you end up with stats like these, that 80% of chronic illness is preventable. It's due to lifestyle reasons. The cost of insurance is raising at least 10% every year. And the current tools we have, which are brilliant tools, things like employee assistance programs, virtual GPs, are just not being used. Utilization is really low. But it isn't all doom and gloom. Obviously, there are ways out of this, and there are solutions. And there's a very easy solution: prevention, right? It's very easy. Just prevent everything. If you prevent it, people don't get sick, insurance claims don't go up. But prevention is hard. It is hard. Hands up if you know one thing you could do today to improve your health. One thing you could do. I mean, I would expect almost everyone to have their hand up. And if I asked you if you know 2 things that you could do, you'd probably still keep your hand up. 3 things, 4 things. Eat a little bit better, go for a walk, do some mindfulness, sleep. We all know what we need to do, but we still don't do it. So education is not the thing. Prevention is hard because we're hardwired to only think about the short term and not the long term. So the question is, how can we get people to engage so that we get to prevention? Because that is the answer. Prevention is the answer, but it's not easy to get there. And when we look at it within a work setting, we have protection, which is the insurance, and right at the other end we have, okay, we've gone all the way through to prevention. So at the end of the day, this is about employee benefits and how we can help people through them. So when you start with protection, the insurance itself, you are giving value to your audience, about 0.1%, 1 in 1,000 people. Now, you don't want that to be higher because that means people are dying. So, you know what? 1 in 1,000 people got tangible value from their benefit. That's not a lot. Then you layer on the employee assistance program, the virtual GP, which are great tools, but not utilized. Now you're reaching 2%, 2.5% of your staff. You're spending a lot of money to give value to 2.5% of your staff. And then we've seen that prevention has been really important over the last few years, and it's been incredible to see what so many companies have done. So you give your staff access to mindfulness. Do you do yoga sessions? And maybe you reach 20%. Now those 20%, what is the problem with those 20%? The problem with those 20% is that they were already doing those things. So you're giving tools and you're spending money on people who are already doing it. Because those are the people. When you run a mindfulness session at the office, the people who attend that are the people who are already doing mindfulness. If you start a running club, the people who go running are the ones who are already running. So the question is, how do you actually get to that 80, 90, 100%? That is the real question that we need to look at, is how do we attract or get everybody else to do that little bit more? And that really is the key challenge, because the way that we get to prevention, or we use prevention to increase longevity, reduce morbidity, help people to live longer, is by doing small things every day. It's not what you do today that counts, it's what you do every day. So why is this difficult to do? It's not fun. How many of you have ever used a tool that your company has given you voluntarily outside of the workplace? I mean, like maybe if you were given a nice laptop, you've got the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro, you go, ooh, this is cool. This is a work tool that I'm going to use. But that's because Apple built it, not because your company did. So tools that are generally built for companies are not fun. And it's understandable because those tools are built to be effective at the lowest possible cost, which means what gets sacrificed is that end user experience. Because you know what? When you say to your staff, you have to use this to do your job, they have to use it to do their job. And they don't enjoy it, it's not great. So you need to start to think about not just function, but emotion. Second problem. Getting people to use something that isn't totally... It's hard enough to get people to use the things that are compulsory. It's hard enough to get them to use that. But when you want to give something to people that will help them, it's hard to get the engagement. I've seen lots of nods around the room. And especially as HR professionals, this becomes your job. How many of you had the situation where you saw a need, you built a business case, and you went to the CEO, CFO, and said, this is something we need. It's great. They go, amazing, we've pushed you hard on price, blah, 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 go and implement it. And you implement it. 2 weeks later, everyone is so excited. 6 weeks later, no one remembers they've got it. 4 months later, the CEO comes back to you and says, hey, I heard about this really great product, we should buy it. Like you have this hype cycle and it goes and comes. So you have to continually work to get people to use things that benefit themselves. And even if you're successful at doing both of those things, so you make it fun and it's engaging, there is a bigger problem. Is it working? What does good look like? Do you have the data? Do you have access to data to see, are people using it? And are there benefits coming out of it? And data is complex, so you don't always know the answer. Is there anyone brave enough in the room to tell me the usage of their EAP, the utilization rate? What is it? 9%. 9%. That is exceptionally high. It's about 4 times the average. Is that good or bad? So wait. Somebody else. Is that good or bad? Yes.
So ours is 10.1%.
Okay, listen, I'm not looking for competition here. All right. Okay, so now I need a third person. Which one is better, 9% or 10.1? Both exceptionally high. Was their hand up or you just... No.
Although ours is a little bit higher, but again...
I mean, this is ridiculous.
The problem is, do you know how many could benefit?
Well, so the question is, so I was hoping someone would take a stab and just say, well, the 10% is better. But the truth is you don't know. You don't know. The 9% I mean, you're all 4 or 5 times higher than the average. But is it good or bad? Is it high because actually your guys' staff are the most stressed in the entire world, and that's really bad? Or is it really you've done an incredible job communicating it and you are getting to everyone who needs it? So data on its own is not helpful. You need trends. You need to be able to see how does that compare. You need to be able to dig in further. So it's not easy to understand what good is. And that's with the EAP. So people are using it, great. What does that actually mean? And then you need to be able to get more data to answer that question. So if I asked a hypothetical question like, 40% of your staff are doing mindfulness, good or bad? No idea. If I said to you, 40% of your staff are doing mindfulness between midnight and 3 a.m., interesting, right? Gives you a little bit more context. And we've had that. A lot of our data shows that. It's not uncommon. People battle with sleep and they're using mindfulness to go to sleep. Not uncommon, but now we've got a reason. Oh, that's interesting. What happens if I told you that 40% of your staff are doing mindfulness between midnight and 3 a.m., and the majority of them are based in London and they're aged between 20 and 30? Bit more interesting, right? Because now you can compare that to your other staff. So when you have the ability to really dig in and not just see that headline number, you get to ask questions. You don't get the answers. You get to ask questions. And that's where the real magic is the ability to ask questions. So how do you actually do this? I've got 3 slides with 3 practical things that you can do. None of them say buy YuLife, but obviously that's the real answer. So the first one is to say focus on the joy and the emotion. Does anybody know what the world's most successful fitness app is? Come on. Throw me. No, it's not Strava. One more, and then I'll move on. One more person. Be brave. Sorry? No, not Strava, not Fitbit, not Apple. It's none of those. It's Pokemon Go. Why? It's fun. But they never told you to become fitter. It never said go for a walk. It said go and catch that imaginary monster on the side of the road. And I did for 3 years, to the point which my wife said, it's those imaginary monsters or me. And I was like, can I get back to you on that? We're happily married still, so okay. So I chose her. It was not easy, but the point is, Pokemon Go got more people walking than any other app. Why? Because it didn't say go for a walk. Fitbit, Strava, all of those are hitting the 20%. It's the people who are already doing it, and you want to see how much am I doing, or you got it free, right? Pokemon Go got the 80% walking because it created a fun, joyful, emotional connection with people who then wanted to do the activity because of how they felt, not because it said go for a walk. That's number one. Start with that. And often that's the last thing you think about when buying a service, because you start off with, does it meet our needs? How much does it cost? Can we implement it? Can I get sign-off? And then after all of those things, you go, okay, maybe we need to think about how this is going to affect the people who are going to use it right at the end. Number two, people are different. I mean, I'm sure that I don't need to tell you that, but what's the phrase? I love it. It says, just remember, all of us are individuals. Everyone is unique. We're all individuals. And we are motivated, inspired by different things. So when you implement something, it's often very single track. Things like, we're going to do yoga in the office. That only appeals to the people who are very much motivated by just that one thing. So you need to think about people's motivations, and when you get something, it needs to be able to be multifaceted. And the bottom line is, well, the difficulty with motivation is you don't know what people's motivations are. There are certain things you can look at in terms of demographics, because there are broad and very blunt tools that will give you some help, but obviously these are very blunt. So for example, age is something you can look at when you look at it. So one of the things that we got challenged with a lot in the beginning with us was that people said, I can see everything you're doing is going to appeal to my young audience. The older people aren't going to give a damn. And we are I'm very happy to say that didn't kind of play out. But we see this interesting thing where there's a bit of a U-curve. So young people, 20s and 30s, well, I say young people, I'm about to turn 40, so like those are the young people these days. But is a very high usage. We're born with technology, we know how to use it. Then there is a dip, and we started to panic. Oh my God, that thesis is older people are going to stop using us. And then we see this incredible spike from 50 going up to be some of our biggest power users. And I really didn't expect that. When we dig into it, because that let us ask a question. Was that good or bad? We didn't know. People in their 40s tend to be very career focused. This is the time I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I need to become the VP. I need to be this. I need to be that, at the expense of their health. And then you hit 50, 55. You start to feel the aches and the pains. And you're like, ooh, I better do something about this. So you get this interesting thing. So you need to look at the demographics of your company to see what will work. Another interesting one on motivation came from Dr. Chatterjee, who's our Chief Wellbeing Officer. And we were at an event like this, and he was talking. And someone said, we've been running mindfulness, and it's doing really well with the females at the office, with the women. But almost no men are coming. Can you give me advice on what we should do different? And he said, it's not the mindfulness that's the problem. He said, it's the way you advertise it, because people's motivations are different. He said, don't badge it as mindfulness, because what you're seeing is that you've alienated a large portion of people who feel uncomfortable to come and sit in a room with their eyes closed amongst their colleagues. But if you call it, come to a focus for success session, you're going to get a very different audience coming, because now it's competitive. Now this is going to help me succeed. It's fascinating, understanding people's motivations. So there are a lot of motivations you can play on. Competition, we saw 9%, 10%, 12% just on the EAP. And we didn't even know if that was good or bad, but it was competition. There's cooperation. You need to have these structures built into the service so that you can make people do what they need to do, because it's hard for people to do those things. And the last one is around access. It needs to be easy. So I don't know if anyone has heard about BJ Fogg, the Fogg model. So he's one of the world leaders in behavioral change. How do you get people to do a behavior? So Professor Fogg has a model called BMAT. The behavior is equal to three things, which is the M is motivation, the A is accessibility or ease, and the T is a trigger. You need all three of those things for a behavior to happen. Very simple example to bring it to life. The behavior I want is to answer the phone. Simple behavior, right? Motivation. What's happening here? My wife told me this morning that my mother-in-law wants to come and visit in February, and she's going to phone me to chat about the visit. I have no motivation to answer that call. My phone's in my pocket, it's easy to get to, and my phone's on loud, so when it rings, there's a trigger. But I don't do the behavior because I've got no motivation to answer the call. Conversely, as I said, it's coming up to my 40th birthday, if my wife said to me, listen, my mom wants to give you this round-the-world ticket to go on a cruise, it's not going to happen. You know, same situation. All of a sudden, my motivation's really high. I want to answer the call. It's easy. The phone's in my pocket, but I left the phone on silent. There was no trigger. I didn't do the behavior. Simple. Behavior, so you need the trigger, you need it to be easy to do, and there needs to be motivation. Those three things. So great, simple model to look at what you're using or any tools or services. Is there a trigger? Will it motivate people? And is it easy to use? And this is my final slide. This is a different one to what I had in my slide pack. But because when you send it through and people change it afterwards. But what we were wanting to do here, or hopefully what might come up as the next slide as well, is to show that you really can make a difference when you get this right. So we know that we can actually get to often an audience of 80% we can get. Often more. Smaller companies, it's more. Bigger companies, it's not as easy to get there. But you can do behavior change as well. We get people walking more. We get a very high level of mindfulness. And we do get people to engage in the EAPs and things a lot more at those levels when you can go up from 2 to 10%. So you really can do it. And the beauty is something we actually did recently is we did get that next step validated with Forrester in that you can actually get business outcomes. And this is important when you set those business cases and go ask for more budget, is that we have actually been able to show that these healthy behaviors lead to lower absenteeism. It leads to lower staff turnover from the staff that you don't want to leave. And it does also increase productivity. So we actually have that validated now, which is a very, very good place to be in. So those are the slides that I had. And hopefully I've given you a little bit of context and ideas. And we do have 3 minutes for questions.